From under the Golden Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capitol Report.
Hello everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Capitol Report. I'm Bill Laird along with co-host Dave Perry, and we have a great show lined up for you today, a very timely matter. Certainly education reform has been a very important topic of debate and concern here in the Mountain State. Certainly during the regular session of the West Virginia Legislature, it dominated the regular session, and now we're into special sessions. Governor Jim Justice reconvened the legislature in special session to take up certain matters related to efforts to improve education in the state of West Virginia, and we're real pleased at this time to be joined by a good friend of ours, a person who has been front and center in matters concerning public education in the state of West Virginia. Ms. Tega Toney, the Vice President of the West Virginia AFT, and Tega, welcome to the Capitol Report.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for having me.
Just to kind of start out the discussion, this is really I think it's been dubbed comprehensive education reform. The bills have been called an omnibus bill. Just so many moving parts to this legislative effort. Quite frankly, I'm confused. I think the general public is confused when you have those many substantive yet important issues packed into one piece of legislation. So from your standpoint, has that in some way contributed maybe a little bit to the problem, in the sense that maybe if we had separate self-contained pieces of legislation, those things can be processed and stand on their merits or fall? I think I read where Senator Unger called this like a box that you find at a yard sale. It had some things in it that were good and other things that are junk. Is that a fair summary?
That was a great analogy that Senator Unger gave us on Saturday. And you know, the stance that we have taken and our members have taken and AFT has taken is that there are some good components to this bill. Teacher pay raises, school service personnel pay raises, more funding for wraparound services, school nurses, counselors, mental health services. But there are also some really bad things for public education in this bill. And our stance the whole time has been, let these components run on their own, stand or fall on their own merits. It'll cut down on confusion with the general public, and really we would get a good solid hold on trying to fix public education and what the constituents of this state and what the public school employees of this state feel will help public education, much more than if we just lump everything together, have the bad with the good. That is not good policy, and that's not a good way to govern.
Tega, this saga started on Saturday. Can you tell us a little bit about what teachers did on Saturday and what took place in Charleston on Saturday?
Absolutely. Well, the governor called a special session on education betterment. Senate President Mitch Carmichael brought us back into session on Saturday, and we rallied the troops. So we put a call to action, and we had a pretty good showing on Saturday. In some of these counties, it was the very first Saturday of school being out, of summer break. We filled all of the galleries, we filled the area outside of the Senate chambers, and we rallied against what we thought, or we still think, are the bad components of this bill, which in turn makes this whole bill kind of sour to us.
I know on Saturday there was an attempt to suspend the rules.
There was.
And that didn't occur.
Right. I believe that vote went down 18-15 or 18-16, if I recall, 18-15. And the whole process of that, or our whole thinking with that is, let's be deliberative. You know, we have in the state constitution a charge to read bills for 3 days so that we can properly vet them and be thorough with them and be deliberative about them. It's almost, I akin it to almost malpractice to take a bill of this magnitude and of this importance and try to rush it through in one day and expect there to not be any pushback. Our Democrat senator friends, along with Senator Kenny Mann and Senator Bill Hamilton, said, no, we are not going to do that. We want more time for this bill, and we want the process to play out. And I just want to bring an interesting point here. Senator Rucker today said this bill is bipartisan. It's really not. There were no people from across the aisle to vote for it. I think the most bipartisan vote we've had is to A, not suspend rules, and B, to kill this bill in the Senate. Because we have had 2 Republicans cross over that really feel this isn't good for public education as well.
I know this appears to be an all-out attack on public education. Some have said it's reformation. I like to refer to it as education needs transformation. And of course, there was also a introductory resolution that the state board become elected officials by Senator Blair.
Right. Yeah, I noticed that. And also, he wants the state board to email every public school employee the message of the Student Success Act as well. I was in the gallery when Senator Blair gave that speech. You know, we can go down that road, but I think that's also something you want to consider as well, because when you're talking about state board elections, those are 9 seats you have to fill, and elections, for better or worse now, there's big money involved in that. And so that's something that we have to consider when we talk about state board elections as well. You know, our state board is one of the front lines for public education, and we've had a state board that has been on the side with teachers, and we appreciate that, because just as we go in the trenches every day in the classrooms to fight for public school students, you guys understand the other components of that too. And correct me if I'm wrong, and you would know better than I would, but I think we have a lot of people who are connected to the public education system on the state board and in our local board here in Fayette County as well.
You are correct, and that's the first time that's occurred in a number of years.
Right.
I also understand that Senator Trump introduced part of a bill that took away the right for teachers to exercise their freedoms in terms of speaking out or work stoppages and so forth. Could you explain to us a little bit what that bill does?
Yeah, so that was an amendment that Senator Trump offered yesterday on Sunday, and it passed, and it's attached to the bill now. Really, it's a retaliation measure, a retribution measure, and I'll be so brazen as to say it's an all-out attack on public school employees and unions. That amendment says that public school teachers have no right to strike. We could be fired if we strike. We could lose pay if we strike, even though we do currently make those days up at the end of the year. And he also took a shot at local superintendents, county superintendents. He said in this amendment, it says that they are not allowed to call school off in consortium with a work stoppage or to help a work stoppage, which is ironic because we have heard a lot of a push from those Republicans about local control, but yet they do not want to let local superintendents make those calls on their own.
And of course, during the last work stoppage, there were a lot of schools called off, but it was based on weather,
Right.
unsafe conditions for students.
Right.
So what if you had that situation again? What do you do?
Right. Well, we can't control the weather. Local superintendents can't control the weather. Senator Trump can't control the weather. So you know, that's another piece to this. It's bad practice to take that power away from local superintendents and take that decision-making process out of their hands, because our local superintendents, they are there for the kids just like we are. And if they feel that there is a safety issue with kids being in a building and not being supervised, then I think they should have the power and the ability to make that decision on their own.
Tega, you know, one of the criticisms during the regular session, I think it was a valid and legitimate criticism, was that stakeholders were not engaged in the process of, you know, formulating the proposals included in the content of the omnibus education bills. So it seemed to me to be a reasonable step was to engage in the series of public meetings that were held around the state. The sense that I, and I'm sure the general public had, was, well, you know, this is listening to the people, and I understand that ultimately the result of that was a formulation of some type of report, which I suppose summarized some of the content. And in some of our discussions, it appears that you know, there was general agreement. I think it's fair to say that perhaps charter schools was not well received by the general public, and as a result of these public hearings, the ESAs are ways in which to divert you know, public monies to persons that may pursue private education. Some what I think could generally be considered unpopular measures. I guess I have a couple of parts to the question. You know, where was the AFT in that public hearing open ears process. Did we listen to what the public had to say in reloading the content of the legislation? And maybe at the end, if you could tell our viewers whether some of those generally unpopular pieces of that legislation are included in what the Senate passed.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So to answer your first question, AFT was all over the place on those public hearings. The Department of Education held public hearings. We had people there, but we also had a lot of people that are not necessarily AFT members, but they're supportive of public education.
Right.
We had a lot of parents. 40% of the respondents on these surveys and at these meetings identified themselves as parents or community members. So we did have public school employees at these meetings that the department put on. We also put our own on. I know the Democrat senators went on a listening tour of sorts. And so we had members there, but we also had community members there. And I think that's the piece that's being ignored or maybe lost in this, is that 40% of the respondents at the department meetings were not public school employees. They identified as supportive community members or as community members. 88% of West Virginia taxpayers reject charter schools. An even higher percentage reject ESAs. Their main focus was wraparound services for kids in the school system. The opioid epidemic is ravaging our school system. It's ravaging our state. Teachers, school service personnel were on the front lines. We see it manifesting in the school system daily, and the issues with it are only increasing. Our community members see it. They see it in their towns. They see it when they walk down the street or when they go to the grocery store. Everyone knows that's an issue, and everyone wants to help kids who are affected by this. And so those wraparound services were the number one thing that came out of those forums. And even the community members even identified with a pay increase to attract and retain our best and brightest employees. When we're talking about 700 vacancies in West Virginia, we have to do something to draw people into this state that want to work here. And pay is one thing, benefits is another, and employee workplace rights. Those are all major components of that. The unfortunate piece of this is that it seems and it appears that some of those nasty components that West Virginia taxpayers rejected in those forums have made its way back into what Senator Carmichael calls the Student Success Act, and I tend to call Omnibus 2.0 because it's almost like it's been born again. Here we are again, Groundhog Day. And to add to that, there's even a piece in this Omnibus 2.0 bill that takes seniority for a public school employee and downplays that in RIF and transfer processes. So that's an attack on employee rights as well. So unfortunately, some of the bad components have made its way back into this bill.
So I guess it'd be fair to say, just because you say you're listening doesn't mean that you hear.
That's probably the best way to put it that I've heard. Absolutely. I've always said actions speak louder than words, and I've also always said you can't just tell us you love us, you have to show us you love us. And right now, we're just not feeling the love when it comes to actions from the 18 senators in West Virginia who seem to be going a different direction from the rest of West Virginia.
Right. One other, quick part of this, obviously we have a bicameral legislature, thank goodness, and
Right.
It appears as if the train left and it's down the track, at least with respect to the focused commitment of the majority of the state Senate. But, a little bit of an unusual situation from my standpoint. I'm sure it's happened, but to have a special session where, both houses are not in concurrent meeting at the same time is a bit unusual. And the information I have at this time is the House of Delegates, I think, are set to reconvene in special session June 17th, I believe. And so from the AFT standpoint, I assume the landscape shifts and you're going to work in the House of Delegates.
Absolutely. They have called Speaker Hanshaw has called the delegates back into session on the 17th. That coincides with interims. They already had interims scheduled for the 17th and 18th. So yeah, we are going to focus our efforts there. Speaker Hanshaw has already taken the delegates and divided them into 4 subcommittees to look at bills individually. And what we're being told and what we're hearing out in the press and the media is that they are more inclined to look at bills individually rather than a whole big package sort of bill. So we'll see what happens when the 17th rolls around and Speaker Hanshaw gavels the session in. But we are definitely going to focus on the House, and we have a lot of friends that are delegates, and that is a bipartisan effort. We have a lot of Democrat friends, and we have a lot of Republican friends in the House of Delegates.
Well, we'll have to stay tuned and see what happens as we continue to grind through what is certainly important to the state of West Virginia, and that's our public education system. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break at this time and be right back to the Capitol Report. So stay with us, everybody.
Stay tuned. The West Virginia Capitol Report will be right back. The West Virginia Capitol Report is brought to you by the AFL-CIO of West Virginia, Cucumber & Company, online at cucumberandcompany.com, and Mark Hunt & Associates, toll free at 800-554-1280. From under the Golden Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capitol Report.
Welcome back to the Capitol Report as we continue our discussion about public education in the state of West Virginia. Our guest today, Tega Toney, the Vice President of the state AFT. And David, it's your turn, my friend.
Well, Tega, you talked a little bit about perception and parent participation and parent surveys in regard to charter schools and S's and being 87-88% opposed to. Let's talk a little bit about public perception that was printed in 2018 in the Pi Delta Kappa magazine, which 70-some% of West Virginians are satisfied with their schools. Students, 76% are satisfied with their schools. So apparently we're doing something right in public education in West Virginia.
Right. Yeah, absolutely, Dave. You know, we work to serve all students. And I think what's important to remember here is your teachers and your school service personnel, we are members of the communities that we work in. We are also community builders. You know, we are also Little League coaches. We also are church members. We are ingrained in our communities. And so I think that plays into a lot of the public perception. When the community members saw that we were struggling in our schools and that we need more resources and we need ways to attract young, bright people into this profession, they stood with us because we have the best interests of kids at heart, their kids at heart. And I think they can agree that our public schools are doing the best we can with the resources that we have. And I think they're satisfied, for the most part, with the efforts put forth by public school teachers and public school service personnel.
I know there's one particular group that's been rather disappointing to me, and that's the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce. While the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce has misrepresented figures in terms of student achievement, wonder if they're willing to accept the fact that we're now number 50th in terms of job creation in the nation.
Right. It's almost like the pot calling the kettle black, right? The Chamber of Commerce is stepping and overreaching into the education realm, yet they are not doing their part in bringing in businesses to West Virginia. And I want to just clarify something. I'm talking about the State Chamber of Commerce. We have on good authority, many local chambers of commerce have come to us and said, we support public education. The State Chamber does not speak for us on the local level. So, you know, we appreciate the support from the local chambers. The State Chamber, however, has come out guns a-blazing against public education in West Virginia. Meanwhile, the jobs report has come out, or the business report has come out, and we're 50th in attracting businesses. So the Chamber of Commerce has some work to do in their own field, I would think.
I agree with that 100%, and I think you point out very well that it is the state chamber and not local chambers that have taken this position.
Tega, you know, I think sometimes we can make public policy debates as complicated as we want to, and but at the end of the day, you know, from my perspective, highly qualified, capable, competent, dedicated teachers at the head of the classroom, motivating and inspiring students to learn. Maybe I'm a little too simplistic in my the way in which I look at the world, but that's certainly what's impacted my educational pursuits, and I think a large percentage of our viewers probably have had their lives imprinted by educators and teachers. So, you know, I'm concerned that maybe part of this debate, you know, the turmoil associated with the teaching profession may hold the potential of having some type of chilling effect on our best and brightest who we want to try to see enter into the field of education. There's been a decline of students in teacher preparation classes in our higher educational institutions. We may be on a collision course for a self-induced teacher shortage if we continue, you know, looking upon that profession in a less than an honorable manner. But you're a classroom teacher. You chose that occupation. Why should anybody want to enter the teaching profession?
Well, I think you've hit a good point there. You know, we go into the teaching profession because we love kids and we love our country and we want to make our country better. You know, every teacher is a role model, and every teacher goes into the profession wanting to help kids, not only academically, but also in other realms in life. When you're a teacher, you're a role model in the classroom and out of the classroom. You know, and I contend it's one of the most patriotic things to become a teacher. You're looking at raising the future doctors, or not raising, I'm sorry, but teaching raising in some cases,
Right.
the future, you know, doctors, lawyers. We may have in our classrooms in Fayette County a kid who's going to find the cure for cancer. And so, you know, when you look at teaching, you have to look at the whole package of it. You look at helping kids, helping your community, helping your state, helping your country. And I think that's one of the biggest things with teaching is we're attracted to the idea of giving back, doing something for our state, for kids that live here, for the families that live here. And I think that's one of the major things. But you have hit a good point. All of this going on is going to, you know, the tax on teachers is going to drive people away. When you're talking about going into a profession that has low pay and you're coming out with $500 or $600 a month student loan payments, you know, benefits are eroding quickly, and then you have to deal with a tax from your own state government. What does entice someone who is young and bright to come into this profession and stay in this profession?
And you know, that could indeed be a collateral consequence of the debate that's going on. But one other quick thing, and then I'll turn it over to David. Parity and opportunity, and you're exactly right. Somewhere sitting in a classroom, somewhere in West Virginia, may indeed be that student who has it within their capacity to change the world.
Bill, and has been.
Yes.
You might know it has been.
Yes, and the thing that I suppose about carving out exceptions and not looking at improvements in overall public education as a whole and starting to slice and dice, you know, special schools and charter schools, it detracts from the strength of the whole, and it perhaps gives lack of equality in terms of opportunity for our children, and I think that's something worth thinking about.
Absolutely. It could, you know, when we're starting to talk about charter schools, we're starting to talk about, you know, a classist system here within our own kids and our own young people. And that's the last place you want something like that to manifest, is in schools.
No doubt.
I know another factor I think has affected public education. Since 2009 to date, the amount of monies that's committed to public education has declined by 6.5%.
Right. Well, you know, nationwide, when the recession hit, states pulled back their funding for public education. And as the economy started to grow in the nation, that money was never put back into public education. It has been siphoned in other areas. Some areas have, you know, been deserving of that, but when we're talking about siphoning that money to a private for-profit venture rather than putting it back in the public education system, that's concerning.
I think we saw that in 2015 when Governor Tomlin cut the innovative school monies out.
Oh, absolutely. That was a blow. That was a blow to public schools and public education, and we are working hard to try to get the funding back for the Innovation in Education grants and program.
Well, Tega, unfortunately our time has expired, but Dave and I really want to thank you for taking time out to join us here on the Capitol Report, and I wish you and the AFT continued good luck in your efforts to represent the interests not only of teachers throughout the state of West Virginia, but our students are our most valuable resource.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break, and we'll be back to close things out. Stay with us.
The West Virginia Capital Report is brought to you by the AFL-CIO of West Virginia, Cucumber and Company, online at cucumberandcompany.com, and Mark Hunt and Associates, toll free at 800-554-1280. From under the Golden Dome in Charleston, this is the West Virginia Capital Report.
Welcome back to the Capital Report as we close out today's show. And Dave, again, the Senate has acted, and again, the House is yet to come, but boy, important things occurring in our capital as we try to move forward and improve public education in West Virginia. And Tega Toney, very knowledgeable source in terms of the efforts of the AFT.
Yes, she is, Senator, and it was very exciting to hear her talk. And I'm looking forward to what the outcome of this situation is. I don't feel very positive about it, but we'll see come June 17th.
No doubt about it. And again, some things have been done, but still have a ways to go. But again, to you, the viewers, we'd like to thank you all for tuning us in each week as we bring you up-to-date information affecting the lives of the citizens of the state of West Virginia. On behalf of co-host Dave Perry, I'm Bill Laird saying thanks for tuning us in. Have a good week, and goodbye, everybody.